The day my wife won $8.5 million, she told me we were never meant to last and changed the locks. But the prenup clause she forgot about turned her jackpot into my revenge and made me richer than her entire family. 3 weeks earlier, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Noah Carter, 35 male. A simple man who owned a small boat repair shop down by the Charleston harbor. Nothing fancy, just honest work. Fixing fishing boats, restoring old pleasure crafts, helping locals get back on the water. I took pride in that simplicity. My wife, Sophie, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She was a marketing director at a huge construction company called Whitmore Holdings. Her family owned it, old Charleston money, the kind of people who look down on anyone who works with their hands. When we got married 3 years ago, her father, Thomas Whitmore, had made me sign a prenuptial agreement thicker than a phone book. It covered every penny of their family wealth, trust funds, company assets, everything. I didn't care. I loved Sophie with everything I had, and I figured I'd never need their money anyway. But buried inside that pile of legal paper was one odd little clause. Anything won from a lottery using marital funds would be considered joint property. I barely noticed it back then. Who even thinks about lottery tickets when you're busy planning a wedding? Then, 3 weeks ago, Sophie calls me out of the blue, practically shaking with excitement. "Noah," she breathes, "you're not going to believe this. I just won $8.5 million. First, I thought she was joking, but then I realized she was dead serious. She'd bought the ticket during her lunch break, using our joint debit card, the same one we used for groceries, gas, and every other expense. The same account I'd been depositing half my shop earnings into for 3 years. First, I was overjoyed. I started dreaming, paying off our parents' mortgages, taking that trip to Ireland we'd always talked about, setting up college funds for my nephews. Simple, honest dreams. But Sophie's reaction was different. Within days, she started acting strangely, secretive, cold. She told me not to mention the win to anyone, especially my family. Then came the whispered phone calls to lawyers I'd never heard of, not our regular financial advisor, but new ones, all connected to her father's firm. When I asked to sit in on one of the meetings, she dismissed me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You just feel out of place with all the legal talk, Noah," she said casually. "That should have been my first warning. But love makes you blind, and I was still seeing her the way I did on our wedding day, not the way she really was." Then came Friday night. I got home from the shop, hands still covered in engine grease, ready to eat dinner and maybe celebrate. But instead, I found my suitcase sitting by the door. The locks had been changed. Sophie was standing there in a designer dress I'd never seen before, arms crossed, eyes cold as marble. "Dad was right," she said flatly. "We were never meant to last. I'm filing for divorce." Just like that, my whole life collapsed into a single sentence. The condo we lived in was technically in her name, though I'd paid half the mortgage for 3 years. None of it mattered. Within hours, I was locked out of my own home. The next day, her father called me. His voice dripped with contempt. "Walk away quietly, Noah," he warned, "or you'll regret it. Money can't buy class, and you'll never earn it." 2 days later, Sophie's mother, Elaine, showed up at my parents' house, the same modest home I'd grown up in. She handed me an envelope with what she called a settlement offer. The amount inside was barely enough to cover what I'd spent on that condo. Attached was a non-disclosure agreement. Before I could even read it, she looked around my parents' living room like she'd stepped into a barn. "My daughter deserves better than someone who works with his hands," she said. "Take this, Noah. Do the right thing." That night, I sat awake in my childhood bedroom, listening to the tugboat horns echo across the Cooper River. My father left a cup of coffee outside my door every morning like I was a teenager again, and each time I saw it, my heart ached. How could the woman I loved throw me away so easily? Then, while sorting through old papers for my taxes, I found something that changed everything. Tucked in my late mother's belongings was my birth certificate. At the bottom, a faded stamp read "Adoption pending, confidential order." My blood ran cold. I'd always believed I was my parents' biological son. Soon after, A woman who used to work with my mom at the county clerk's office reached out to me after hearing about my divorce. She told me something that shook me to my core. My mother had once worked as a secretary for a man named Raymond Harlow, the founder of the original construction company that eventually became Whitmore Holdings, the very same company that made Sophie's family rich. The woman whispered that there had always been rumors that Raymond Harlow had a secret child who disappeared from records after he died suddenly in a car accident. Now, sitting there with my birth certificate in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to take a turn no one could have predicted. If I was truly Raymond Harlow's son, that would mean the company Sophie's family controlled was built by my biological father. The same company that just tried to destroy me. Should I take their hush money and walk away? Or should I dig deeper and find out the truth? Something inside me told me this story was only just beginning, and the Whitmores had no idea what they'd just awakened. The next morning, I drove to Columbia and hired a family attorney who had never heard of the Whitmore name. Fresh eyes, no bias. When she read through the prenup, she started laughing. Not out of mockery, but pure surprise. "This windfall clause," she said, pointing to the section about lottery winnings, "is airtight. If she used marital funds to buy that ticket, then the winnings are legally marital property." We hired a forensic accountant. He dug through our bank records like a detective solving a crime. The lottery ticket had been purchased at 2:47 p.m. on October 15th using our joint debit card. The same card Sophie had texted me about that morning. "Can you check if there's enough in our account for gas?" Gotcha. But things only got wilder from there. My lawyer began investigating the adoption angle. What she found nearly knocked me out of my chair. A dormant trust fund established in 1988 under Raymond Harlow's name, set to transfer 5% ownership of Whitmore Holdings to his biological descendant once they reached age 35. I had just turned 35 last month. We filed for DNA testing using archived material from Raymond's estate. When the results came back, the paper nearly trembled in my hands. 99.98% match. I was Raymond Harlow's son, the true heir to the company the Whitmores had renamed and profited from for decades. My lawyer immediately filed a formal notice of beneficial ownership with Whitmore Holdings Board. By law, they had to recognize my claim. Within days, rumors spread across Charleston. The boat mechanic who married Sophie Whitmore is claiming to be the secret heir to the Whitmore fortune. But I didn't care. I also filed a motion to freeze Sophie's lottery winnings pending the divorce settlement. Since the ticket was bought with marital funds, the court had to treat it as shared property. The judge approved the freeze. Sophie's $8.5 million was locked in legal limbo. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. Then, news broke. Harlow heir emerges amid Whitmore family scandal. The story spread like wildfire. Whitmore Holdings stock dropped 12%. The board panicked. They pressured Thomas to explain the legacy irregularities. Thomas tried to fight back, even forcing Sophie to sign a statement claiming the ticket was bought with her own money. But the forensic evidence told the truth. It came from our joint account. And Sophie's own text messages proved it. Elaine made one final attempt to silence me. She came to my parents' house again, holding a bigger check this time, and another NDA. I looked her straight in the eye. "Your family should have thought about this before you threw me away," I said. She replied, "Don't let greed destroy your character, Noah." I smiled. "Greed," I said quietly. "You've been living off my father's legacy for 35 years. Soon after, Whitmore Holdings launched an internal audit, and the results were explosive. Thomas had been using company funds for shell companies he secretly owned. Embezzlement. The board suspended him. The man who once called me a grease monkey was now facing criminal charges. During the court hearing, my lawyer presented everything: the prenup, the bank records, the proof of my eviction. The judge looked at Sophie's lawyers and said, "This is clear bad faith action." The freeze stayed. 3 weeks later, the final hearing arrived. The judge ruled that the lottery winnings were marital property and awarded me 40% of the after-tax amount, plus compensation for my share of the mortgage payments. Not half, but enough to rebuild my life completely. At the same time, the DNA filing triggered the Harlow Trust. I officially owned 5% of Whitmore Holdings. Thomas tried to fight it, but the 1988 documents were unbreakable. I sold most of my shares to a vocational foundation supporting blue-collar workers, welders, electricians, boat mechanics. People like me. Raymond would have approved. Thomas was forced into retirement. Elaine vanished from Charleston's social scene. Sophie moved to Atlanta. Months later, I received a handwritten letter from her. She apologized, said she was in therapy, trying to understand why she let her parents control her life. She ended with, "You were always the only honest one in the room." I never wrote back. Some bridges burned too completely to ever rebuild. Today, I run Harlow Marine Works, an expanded version of my old boat shop. I hired veterans, young apprentices, people who needed a second chance. My shop is bigger, my heart is lighter, and my life is finally my own. I bought a small house by the Ashley River, where I sit each evening watching the sun dip into the water. No fancy mansion. No old Charleston parties. Just peace. Sophie's family once taught me that money equals power. But my father's legacy taught me something greater, that real power comes from building something honest. They tried to destroy me. I built a better life instead. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living so well that the people who betrayed you can't stand to watch. Hit that subscribe button if you believe that karma always finds its way home.